Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, Donald Trump confirms upcoming visit of J.D. Vance to Armenia and Azerbaijan. Pace warns of deepening political polarization and rising church-state tensions in Armenia. And Armenia set to receive €20 million in support through the European Peace Facility. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
U.S. President Donald Trump officially confirmed that Vice President J.D. Vance is set to visit Armenia and Azerbaijan in the beginning of February, marking the highest-level U.S. visit to Armenia to date. Confirming the rumored visit in a social media post, President Donald Trump said Vance will visit both countries to build on his administration's peace efforts and advance the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. Trump said the visit will strengthen America's strategic partnership with Azerbaijan, a beautiful agreement for peaceful nuclear cooperation with Armenia, deals for America's great semiconductor makers, and the sale of made-in-the-USA defense equipment such as body armors and boats and more to Azerbaijan. He also thanked the two leaders for upholding the peace agreement signed last August in Washington, calling the conflict a nasty war, one of 8 that he has ended. While this will be the first visit by a U.S. Vice President to Armenia, then Vice President Dick Cheney visited Baku in 2008. The highest-ranking U.S. official previously to travel to Armenia was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who visited in September of 2022 following Azerbaijani incursions into Armenian territory. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited Armenia in 2010.
On trip, Azerbaijan has begun construction of a power transmission line intended to fully link Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan's unified energy system while laying the groundwork for a broader energy corridor linking Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Europe. This includes a 74-kilometer high-voltage line from Jabrayil to Armenia's border, alongside a parallel 105-kilometer stretch from Nakhichevan to the Armenian border. Now, the line will run along the Arax River and is expected to be connected via the TRIP route in southern Armenia. Under the TRIP implementation framework agreed between Armenia and the U.S. in mid-January, joint venture TRIP Development Company would be granted development rights, including over energy infrastructure such as electrical transmission. No other details have been made public yet. This week, Prime Minister Pashinyan said Armenia sees regional energy interconnection as a key security guarantee, arguing that linking Armenia's energy system with Turkey and Azerbaijan would increase international interest in the stability of regional transport and communication routes. Speaking at a briefing, Pashinyan said the region has surplus energy and strong potential to access international markets. He noted that Armenia is interested in using Azerbaijan's networks for energy exports, while Azerbaijan seeks energy transmission links with Nakhichevan. Pashinyan said interconnected energy systems would allow for joint exports or generate transit revenues through the transmission of electricity across Armenian territory. He added that energy projects are envisaged within the TRIP framework, stressing they pose no threat to Armenia and would instead create new economic opportunities, including transit fees. He added that practical work is already underway and that any concrete agreements reached would be announced publicly.
And the EU and Azerbaijan have agreed to launch a feasibility study for the Nakhichevan railway project. Last week, EU's Marta Kos, European Commissioner for Enlargement, told President Ilham Aliyev that Brussels stands ready to support Azerbaijan's efforts to restore the Nakhichevan railway line. The Nakhichevan railway project is planned to run from Kars to Nakhichevan, linking Turkey and Azerbaijan. It is part of the broader Trans-Caspian transport corridor, also known as the Middle Corridor, which connects China and Central Asia with Europe.
And speaking of connectivity, Armenia's economy minister stated that Azerbaijan will deliver liquefied gas and bitumen to Armenia via Azerbaijani rail networks. Azerbaijani pro-government media, well, there really isn't any anti-government media anymore, has said the products would be imported from Russia. This adds to wheat and fuel shipments in recent weeks from Azerbaijan to our country. Baboyan, the economy minister, did not specify a time frame and added that Armenian businesses can now take advantage of this opportunity.
And Hungary has dropped its veto on €20 million military assistance to Armenia via the European Peace Facility, EPF, and EU funds to help partner states. The decision required unanimous approval of the EU's 27 member states, and we know that Hungary is traditionally vetoing, at least initially, because that's what happened
the first time
around. Well, the first batch of non-lethal military aid to Armenia worth €10 million was approved in July of 2024 for a fully fledged deployable tent camp for a battalion-sized unit. The additional funding will expand the camp to accommodate a brigade-sized force. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, said the new assistance measure is another step towards closer EU-Armenia cooperation in security and defense. She said the measure reflects the EU's commitment to supporting Armenia's resilience, contributing to stability, peace, and security in the region.
The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, otherwise known as PACE, has warned that political polarization in Armenia is deepening, pointing to the stigmatization of political opponents and escalating tensions between Prime Minister Pashinyan and the leadership of the Armenian Apostolic Church. In a resolution covering the January-December 2025 monitoring period, PACE also said it was concerned by reports of alleged plots to seize power involving several clergymen. While noting that Armenia's last three elections since 2018 were free of irregularities, the Assembly stressed the need to tighten regulations on the misuse of public resources and party financing. Ahead of the June 2026 parliamentary elections, it called for dialogue between the ruling majority and the opposition and urged an issue-based campaign free of personal attacks and hate speech. I would love that we would for once have an issue-based campaign ever. Anyway, the Assembly meanwhile welcomed the initialing of a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, calling it a step toward a final settlement of the long-running conflict and urged both sides to sign, ratify, and fully implement the deal. It also called on Azerbaijani authorities to end retaliatory prosecutions and to immediately release all those held on politically motivated charges, including 23 Armenian detainees. Now, 4 of these Armenian detainees were repatriated on January 14. So what we do know that there are 19 Armenians who remain in Azerbaijani custody.
Armenia remains committed to deeper integration with the European Union. Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan told PACE, this is the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, this week, as the country marked 25 years since joining the organization. Mirzoyan pointed to a law adopted last spring, launching the EU accession process, saying it reflects a broader societal choice. He also cited the strategic agenda for the Armenia-EU partnership adopted in Brussels in December, which he said elevates ties beyond the existing comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement to a strategic level. In this sentence, there were several names that were sentences on their own, but warning of rising threats to democracy, including disinformation and foreign interference, Mirzoyan said these challenges will intensify ahead of Armenia's June parliamentary elections, calling the vote a key test of democratic resilience. He also linked democracy and peace, welcoming the release of 4 Armenian detainees held in Azerbaijan and calling for the release of the remaining 19, as well as cooperation on clarifying the fate of missing persons. In response to concerns over church-state relations, Mirzoyan rejected claims of persecution of clergy, calling them misinformation, and said some clergymen had openly called for a violent removal of Armenia's democratically elected government, stressing that the rule of law applies to all.
And Moscow has again voiced concern over Armenia's interest in joining the European Union. Vladislav Maslenikov, head of the European Affairs Department at the Russian Foreign Ministry, said Armenia's forced rapprochement, these are his words, with the EU would have negative consequences both for its alliance with Russia and for integration processes across the post-Soviet space. He said Moscow expects Armenia, as a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, to understand the risks of moving closer to Brussels. Maslenikov accused the European Union of pressuring Yerevan to adopt EU standards in a politically motivated shift that he said ignores Armenia's obligations within the Eurasian Economic Union. He reminded that simultaneous membership in both blocs is impossible.
He used interesting language we were reading earlier.
Yeah, well, you were reading because it was in Russian.
Well, he basically said, the strategic course that Brussels has taken, which is going towards confrontation with Russia and EU's rapid transformation into an aggressive military political bloc, makes Armenia's interest in membership in this bloc a cause for concern.
Right.
So
interesting.
and he's not saying Armenia, he's saying this Transcaucasian Republic, this post-Soviet republic. It's almost like not. It was interesting vocabulary anyway. And Armenia's second president Robert Kocharian sharply criticized TRIP, warning that it primarily serves the interests of Azerbaijan and Turkey while placing Armenia in the midst of competing global powers. In a press conference, Kocharian argued that the United States has zero economic interest in the South Caucasus, dismissing claims of billions in investment or major economic benefits for Armenia. He contended that the roughly 42-kilometer segment in question could be built for at most 80 to 90 million US dollars, an amount Armenia could handle independently without foreign investment. Instead,
Well, then why haven't they done it? Why hasn't anyone done it?
Well, it could have even done for cheaper if they hadn't removed the railways.
In the first place.
Well, instead, he asserted Washington's primary motivation in gaining control over Iran's northern border. He also highlighted Israel's role, noting that U.S. policy in the region is heavily influenced by Israeli interests. Kocharian called TRIP Armenia's biggest security threat. He also said that he would be the only one capable, in his own opinion, capable of
fixing all of our problems,
Armenia's problems,
making us into a union
state. But that should go into the election segment.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
Later. Kocharian also questioned the EU's motives regarding Armenia, commenting on the European Political Community Summit to be held in Yerevan in May. He warned that the Europeans are expected to push the narrative of Russia waging hybrid war against Armenia, which must be countered.
Well, Pashinyan quickly responded to Kocharian's claims regarding TRIP, describing it as an investment-driven economic project rather than a political or security scheme. And in reality, it was reverse-engineered, this whole process. And we've talked about this. It is an economic project. But anyway, Pashinyan said the project would bring hundreds of millions of dollars in investment to Armenia, delivering economic benefits alongside added security guarantees. He argued that international partners, including the U.S., are guided by economic logic and national self-interest and therefore have a clear stake in the initiative.
And to one of our more constant segments, State Church, Armenia's investigative committee has opened a criminal case against the Armenian Apostolic Church for failing to reinstate the primate of the Masyat Zotan Diocese, Bishop Gevorg Saroyan. The case follows the church's decision this week to defrock Bishop Saroyan despite a court order barring any steps that would prevent him from carrying out his duties while the case is still under review. Saroyan is one of the 10 clergymen calling for the resignation of Catholicos Garegin II and is the only one among them to have been defrocked so far. That's a side note, a personal side note. Mm-hmm. The Mother See has said the court ruling constitutes unconstitutional interference in the church's internal affairs. The Masyat Zotan Diocese was founded by Garegin II in 2021, and Saroyan was appointed as the head of the diocese.
Right. So I'm just very curious how the investigative committee is opening up a criminal case against Echmiadzin for an internal decision that they made.
Apparently it's HR now.
I mean, this is just beyond. Anyway, well, speaking of
but
the
we'll
church,
find out.
It's
not clear at this point.
We're trying to figure that out, yeah. Archbishop Hovnan Derderian, primate of the Western Diocese of the Armenian Apostolic Church of North America, will take part in the Council of Bishops that will take place in mid-February in Austria. Derderian is among the bishops aligned with Pashinyan and the Church Reform Council, which last week announced it would boycott the Council of Bishops and called on the Mother See to cancel the meeting. Derderian is also set to participate in the meeting of the Supreme Spiritual Council, scheduled for February 2021. So the saga and the soap opera and the really, it's gotten to the point where it's really upsetting, this whole situation with the
But
church.
I'm trying to be positive here. I didn't know how many dioceses we had.
Now
Who
you
was
know.
the head?
Now you
Now
do.
I know. I have to admit to this. I know very little about church structure or religious
Oh, we're
structure.
learning, aren't we?
Yeah, and
Indeed.
Masyat Zotan, I've learned.
I didn't even know we had a
that
diocese, Masyat Zoltan Diocese. So there you
well,
go.
and
Speaking of
which
which,
a court has extended by 1 month the pretrial detention of Mgrdich Prosyan, primate of the Diocese of Aragazotan. Prosyan was arrested in October on allegations that he coerced clergymen into joining rallies against Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and during the 2021 elections instructed them to vote against Pashinyan's team.
well, this week on January 28, Armenia celebrated the 34th anniversary of the establishment of its armed forces. In a message marking Army Day, Pashinyan stressed the need for continued military and state reforms, citing the creation of a territorial defense system and new service programs as key achievements. He said Armenia's security cannot rest on the army alone, pointing to peace, international legitimacy, and integration into global supply chains as additional safeguards, while insisting the country must also maintain a strong and capable military. Pashinyan also said Armenia has acquired unprecedented volumes of military equipment in recent years. Following earlier procurement failures, he attributed to partners' reluctance and Armenia's membership in the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO. He said that those constraints became clear after Azerbaijan's September 2022 attack on Armenia, when CSTO allies failed to meet security commitments and accused Russia of withholding hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons already paid for, calling it an existential threat to Armenia's sovereignty. The day before, on January 27, Armenia observed first time a new state holiday called a Day of Remembrance of those killed in the defense of the homeland. It's a law designating a Remembrance Day, and it was adopted by Parliament on January 20 after it was introduced in early December of last year.
And in other news, this week Armenia extradited an individual wanted on international charges to Turkey, according to the Turkish Interior Ministry. The suspect, whose identity was not made public, faces charges including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and document forgery. Turkish authorities said the extradition was carried out under an Interpol Red Notice as part of international law enforcement cooperation. The handover marks another instance of extradition cooperation between Armenia and Turkey. About a year ago, Armenian authorities extradited 2 other individuals to Turkey following separate Interpol requests.
And in really upsetting news, because I saw it and I can't understand it. It's from Southern California. We don't usually report on things that happen in the diaspora, but this has become very disturbing, I would say. It involves the Armenian American community. Mehmet Oz, who had a very popular TV show, Dr. Oz. He's the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is facing really harsh criticism for unfairly singling out Armenian American businesses. And it has prompted, sharp rebukes from local leaders, obviously from the Armenian American community, but also California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has filed a civil rights complaint calling the comments baseless and racist. It erupted earlier this week when he was, it was a Twitter thing I saw, Rubina. He was in the backseat of a car and he's in Van Nuys, California, and he's saying, all of these, there's a lot of businesses here who purportedly are, receiving money from Medicaid, and they're run by Russian Armenian mafia. He said it like so many times. It was anyway. He alleges that 42 hospices in the vicinity were involved in fraudulent activities, estimating $3.5 billion in losses, and again, attributing it to the Russian Armenian mafia. And then he was standing in front of a bakery, right? I mean, it's a bakery, it had nothing to do with medical services, and that the owners of the bakery said that their business had gone down by 30%. Because of it. So it was covered in all of the
and
news.
He had just recognized Armenian writing, and he was not even saying the language. He's saying it's a dialect.
Yeah, I know. And it's in Cyrillic.
In
and
this
I want to say,
dialect.
what are you talking about? Anyway, so Newsom's office has issued a statement announcing a review of reports that Oz had targeted the Armenian American community in Southern California, making racially charged claims of fraud outside an Armenian-owned business, or businesses rather. And he's also filed a formal civil rights complaint with federal authorities seeking an investigation into Oz's actions. Anyway, he's known for his close ties to Turkey, for his close relationship with President
DNA.
Erdogan, through his
With
DNA.
Turkey.
And then after Newsom's statement, he just tweeted something that so indifferent, Oz, saying that, we will continue to, weed out any kind of fraud. But it was
Because
absolutely,
he's saying
it was
President
egregious.
Trump won't stand for this.
Yeah, won't stand. But it
I don't know.
was disgusting. But anyway.
Well, back to Yerevan. Back to Armenia. Armenia's State Revenue Committee has published the list of the country's 1,000 largest taxpayers for 2025. The ranking is led once again by Mobile Center.
Amazing. I don't understand this.
Other companies in the top 10 include Grand Tobacco, the Zangezur Copper Molybdenum Combine, Gazprom Armenia, Achim Bank, Ameria Bank, Digitane, International Masses Tabac, CPS Energy Group, and Soft Construct. This is Vivaro
Online
Bank.
gambling,
Between January and December of 2025, Armenia's 1,000 largest taxpayers paid more than $5 billion into the state budget.
And as always, our elections digest, a lot of fun stuff as we keep talking about, waiting for us. Aram Sarkisyan, the leader of the Harabedutyun or Republic Party, has announced he will be his party's candidate for prime minister in the June parliamentary elections. In a video message, Sarkisyan said he wants a political force in parliament that fully upholds Western values, arguing this would counter the dominance of pro-Russian and other forces. He said his party's participation would benefit both the state and the formation of a future government. Aram Sarkisyan, just for our listeners who might not know, is the brother of former Prime Minister and Defense Minister Vasken Sarkisyan, who was assassinated on October 27, 1999. Aram Sarkisyan himself served as Armenia's prime minister after his brother's murder for a few months, end of 99 to May of 2000.
And Levon Zurabian, vice president of the Armenian National Congress, said this week the party is considering joining other political forces ahead of Armenia's upcoming elections. Speaking to reporters, Zurabian said talks are underway with several groups, including Samvel Garabetyan's or Samvel Garabetyan-related In Our Way movement, whom he described as the current front runner. He said the Armenian National Congress, which is the former President Levon Debretosyan's party, favors broad consolidation and would run on a joint list with parties that share its platform. Zurabian also criticized Pashinyan's peace agenda, saying there is no guaranteed peace, and he described the current situation as a temporary pre-election ceasefire aimed at consolidating Pashinyan's power.
And Armenia's second president, Robert Kocharian, who we were just talking about, said his Armenia Alliance is likely to run in the upcoming elections independently, though talks with other political forces are ongoing and a final decision will be announced in February. Kocharian said that his party or his alliance will be conducting polls or a survey planned for early February that will determine who leads the alliance's list, noting that current polls suggest he is the frontrunner.
Very democratic. Meanwhile, the Akanates and Independent Observer election observation missions have warned of persistent risks ahead of Armenia's parliamentary elections. In a joint statement, the group said that while authorities are taking some steps to counter cyber attacks, disinformation, and hate speech, they are largely overlooking unlimited cash and crypto flows, third-party campaigning and financing, and external influence through unregistered political and civil entities. They said legally mandated oversight is poorly implemented, raising doubts about the state's readiness to ensure free, fair, competitive, and transparent elections. The statement calls for urgent reforms to election finance rules, warning that newly created or unregistered political entities can run costly campaigns without oversight, distorting competition and increasing foreign interference risks. It recommends extending transparency requirements to unregistered actors, limiting third-party spending, tightening liability for violations, and accelerating the disclosure of party financial reports, some of which could otherwise become public or shortly before voting or in 2027.
Well, the ruling Civil Contract Party is seeking to pass a bill that would tighten rules governing election observation missions. The draft law, which passed its first reading in Parliament last week, sets clear eligibility criteria for Armenia-registered public organizations to conduct election observation and stresses transparency requirements, including financial transparency for NGOs and foundations involved in monitoring elections. The bill also clarifies the accreditation process through the Central Electoral Commission, introduces separate deadlines for accrediting citizen and non-citizen observers, and sets a 15-day pre-election deadline for applications involving non-citizen observers. It further defines the grounds for denying or revoking observer accreditation. You've done election observation with local NGOs before, right?
Yes,
Rubina?
I've been in 2015. I was a citizen observer. I just arrived back in Armenia at that point. And I very much understand why this could be an issue for Armenia, because in the station where I was stationed, one of the observers was found out halfway through the day that he was a party member.
Right.
And they had done no background checks on us, me including, I'm assuming, as a citizen observer. And that other guy shouldn't have been there.
Well, now the opposition media is trying to frame this as the government not cracking down, but limiting the space for observer missions. But it's also very important. We live in such a polarized society right now to be really careful about who is. I mean, we could create an NGO today and then say we're going to be observers, but really, is that what we're going to be doing? So they're trying to maintain some oversight, I think, with this, but something that we will look into for sure. And as always, articles that we've published this week. This one was by Anna Ghazakhetyan, and at first when I started reading it, I was like, what is she talking about? The unloved others, invertebrate conservation. We don't think about it oftentimes, but she examines how Armenia's conservation priorities overlook invertebrates despite their vital ecological rules. And she talks about, how we love furry animals, and we think of, when we think of conservation or animals on the endangered list, but we don't think about invertebrates. And she explores barriers of stigma, weak research, and habitat loss, urging narratives that value the unloved species sustaining ecosystems. It was very cool.
And we get to speak about your opinion piece this week.
I have a lot of opinions lately.
Well, you titled it Honor Thy Dead, and it was on the occasion of the First Remembrance Day of
January 27.
And there was a lot of things that were brewing right before, when we were wondering why the Parliament Commission about the War Commission thing wasn't made public. Why was it archives? Why is there so much? It's still opaque, the whole military system or the army.
And the reforms. We don't know what's really happening.
We were talking about, even the names of the soldiers who died during the 44-day wars. Like, where is the comprehensive list, and what's the reason there's discrepancies between numbers? And this basically led to you.
It sort of tumbled out of me, Rubina, to be honest, because like you said, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I really wanted to do the War Commission story.
War Commission, that's what
the
word.
And I think we still should push about that, because as I said, it's not only about honoring the dead, but it's also giving the living the answers that we all deserve, right? Anyway, so that was that.
And not so swift segue into our lifestyle section. We did launch our lifestyle issue, Salt, this week. The first article that we published in Salt is titled Time Past. It's by Lilith Markarian, who's sitting here, and he's also our multimedia editor.
Multi-talented multimedia something.
And she did the graphic, and she recorded her own audio article. She edited her own
one-person show here.
Yes, that was a one-person show there. Well, with a little bit help from the friends, editors. She talks about memory and the pressure of constant renewal, arguing that slowing down, noticing change, and building foundations may be the most meaningful way to grow.
Yeah, and how time slips away from us. So
And
appreciate
that time
it.
is gold.
And then a piece by Maria Gunko. It's called Zargatsor and Myler, Two Resorts in Conversation. I always love her pieces, and she always has a unique perspective. So she looks at two Armenian ski resorts and how they reflect different visions of winter leisure. She explores Zargatsor and Myler as a dialogue between continuity, which is Zargatsor, and change, which is Myler, tradition and anticipation, and how their coexistence is reshaping expectations, culture, and the future of winter sports in Armenia. And yeah, that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll be back again next week.